Welcome everybody to the first Victor Heritage Days Roundtable discussion. And I have to thank all of you on stage and all of you that aren't quite on stage for showing up today, because really our history, our memories, it's our people. That's what we want to try to preserve. So we're going to do that today through this roundtable, and I appreciate all of you participating. I'm going to go ahead and introduce all the participants. First of all, from the Victor Heritage Society, we have LaJean Greason, and we have Anna Conley Horton. And they are part of our board for Victor Heritage Society. They're a lot of our energy, a lot of our passion. They have family history here, and they've contributed so much. So we want to thank both of you.
Yay.
Sitting down here is Ed Chenoweth, and this is Rosemary Hayes. We have Mickey Nothouse, Matt Huber. We have Raymond Drake, Brian Hayes, Travis Allen, Tish Allen, Carl Roy, and Stephen Robb. Thank you all so much for being here. Now, we did kind of give them a heads up of what we may be asking, and we're going to have LaJean and Anna facilitate this discussion. So just have fun, engage, have fun.
Welcome and good morning. We have some pre-planned questions, and we know that not everyone has an answer to the question, so we're going to do the best we can here. Our first roundtable question is, what is your most cherished memory having been raised or having resided in the greatest gold camp? And who would like to answer that question first? Okay.
And
here, hold on. Let me just
we moved here in 1973 in a little house on that is no longer there. Has met the bulldozer. It was on 508 West Portland Avenue. In 1975, my son Timothy was born in that little miner's cabin, and he's grown up to be a nice, happy, healthy young man. That's my most cherished memory, besides the Fortune Club and Zeke's place.
Who else would like to?
I came here in 1970, and I feel I was very fortunate to have been able to interview dozens and dozens of people who lived through the history of the area, who shared their memories with me, and I'm trying to pass those memories on to other people.
Tish, would you like to say something?
I have so many. I'm probably the oldest one here when I look here, but I have so many memories, it's hard to say a favorite. I lived, when my dad was in the Navy, he taught welding in Great Lakes. When he was in the Navy, my mother and I lived with my grandmother in her apartment at the Gold Belt restaurant just while I wasn't here. And I sit here and I look at this. I remember this was Hill's, Tom Hill had the station. And this was Hill's place, and there was a two-story. And I used to go up there, and they had pole and wood sheds for the 4 or 5 apartments that were upstairs. And downstairs here was a 1-lane building, and their laundry room. And my grandmother was busy, my mother was busy, and so I just took care of everybody in town. was always over at Walt Brown's grocery store, the Arapahoe where the museum is now. Butch Shafley was his butcher and lived in one of the apartments that went around here. Tara Huber lived with her grandmother in one of these apartments here. No, I remember Nat Huber was the master at that time. I remember watching them decorate the windows at J.C. Penney's. It just fascinated me to watch Cleveland West and Paspahala was one of the guys at the, I don't know, I think he was the manager of J.C. Penney's. We used to stand in line to see Santa Claus at J.C. Penney's. Kids would be lined up all over the street there. And then when J.C. Penney's closed, they moved the Santa Claus line up to City Hall. These are memories from 1940s, you know.
Well, thank you for that. Does anyone else want to, Carl?
Well, I have so many, and I'm like Tish here. Everything she said, I'll vouch for it because I was here at the same time about. We could take all day and tell you stories about the camp, but I know we're short on time and everything. But one of my cherished times, and I get to looking back, I was born and raised here in Victor, Colorado, in a house on Stratton Avenue. A lot of people didn't even know there was a Stratton Avenue, but we live on Stratton Avenue, over below the high school. But there are so many things that I can be thankful for. But one thing that I cherish so much in 1964, and this might shock a lot of you, but I accepted Christ Jesus as my Savior. And I'll tell you, it's been a blessing to me and my family and everything, and He's got us through ups and downs. And while I'm speaking on that, Steve Robb is sitting here to the left. First Baptist Church of Victor was Lauren Robb's great-grandfather, was the first preacher there. I don't know how many of you knew. Dr. Ryder was his name. And I think it was dedicated in 1904 or 5. But anyway, make a long story short, and then I'll get off of here. We was over at Cripple Creek one time, and I was in Gus Conley's filling station, and Lauren Robb was there. And I went to ask Lauren Robb about something that was in the Bible. And Lauren says, okay, and pretty quick the place cleaned out. And Gus come over and he said, say, you and Lauren's going to have to start discussing God outdoors because you're on all my people off. That's all I have to say for right now. Okay.
Thank you, Carl. Does anyone else want to answer?
Mr. Nuthouse, do you have anything for us?
I was born at Cripple Creek, St. Nicholas Hotel, and I've lived here ever since. And I've got a lot of cherished memories of the Victor and growing up here in Victor, especially Zeke's Place, some of the restaurants, Fortune Club and all that. But just growing up here, there is millions of cherished memories.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, a lot of these businesses that these other folks are
You hold
talking
it closer,
about,
please.
some of them, most of them was closed up when I was growing up here during the 60s. But I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Nikki, your mother was a teacher, wasn't she, at one time?
That's right.
What was that?
Portia was a teacher at one
That's
time.
correct.
Wasn't she?
Yes, she taught Goldfield.
That's what I thought.
She was my granddad was a marshal of Goldfield, and then my grandmother taught school not only in Goldfield, but out there in Skagway at the old Skagway house, and then Alta Vista, which is the school was down here in the park now.
That's where Julia Hines started too.
I'm sorry?
Julia Hines taught out there too.
Julia Hines taught out there?
Yes, she taught, there was a lot of memories about Julia.
Yeah, there are. Remember when we used to have to, as freshmen, we had to sweep the stairs going up to the school? You know, I was always kind of late getting there because then I didn't sweep.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to the next question. Describe a typical day of entertainment and a favorite pastime as a youth in Victor or Cripple Creek. Would someone down here like to answer?
Hello, I'm Tim Graven. My brothers were born here in Victor, Colorado. But actually, I'm from Canyon City, but I spent a great deal of time here in Victor. In fact, on a typical fun day, I got to go to school with my nieces, and I was well accepted. And right here at the grade school in Victor. And I remember their class, I was like first or even in second grade. And I'd come up and just stay for a week or so with lots of family that lived in Victor. Too many to tell. They're about on every other block. But they were so far ahead of us in math. But that wasn't the question. But and Canyon had good schools. But Victor, I don't know if the engineers and all the type of people from the mining, but they were so far ahead of us in math. But in our fun days, every day was a fun day in Victor. And I just meet over here with my little buddy Jimmy Seal at the drugstore, which is now the hotel. But I'd go in and after a hot afternoon hiking in the mountains, we did a lot of that and checked out every old mine shaft you're not supposed to be in. And but we would have a nice hot, well, not hot, but a nice ice cold Roy Rogers, I don't know, just a chocolate soda for real, and some beautiful memories, or even Hirschberger when he had the drugstore across, which is now the Fortune Club. But I would sit there at that ice cream bar soda and have a milkshake, and for 25 cents on top of the world, or we would be waiting for the bus, and the bus pulled up, and all the miners' children, all of it, whoever, we got on that bus, and we would head to the Cripple Creek High School and swim free. You're a miner, you're taken care of, and it didn't matter if I walked in what is this multi-million restoration that the gold mining company restored. But I walked in there, and my brother-in-law, all of my family were pretty much World War II vets all over, and they come back to the mining as well as my dad. That's another historic story. But I had a great time. We'd get on that bus and we'd go. We'd sell the iron pyrites on a fun day out there, right there where the division is coming up Fathom Canyon. And boy, I had money in my pocket, so I could go to the ISIS theater for 10 cents and treat all my little nieces and nephews.
Well, thank you for that. Did anyone else want to share a memory about their childhood?
About the what?
About your childhood? Do you have any fun stories about your childhood?
Oh, I got a lot of them. No, I was going to school over here in Victor, at the high school over there. It brings back a lot of cherished memories of the teachers that from the first grade on through high school, you know, the ninth grade when they combined the schools. And I had to go to Cripple Creek. But other than that, it was too numerous to mention out.
Okay. Matt, how about you? Fun stories from your childhood? I know some of them.
Just fun times we had here, like you say, had Harshburgers where you could go in there and get you a root beer float or anything like that. Back then, you could get your money's worth. Not that way now.
That's right. Brian, how about you?
Where are we at?
Childhood?
Well, I could.
So you were here in your
I
childhood,
was
right?
not here.
Can
I'd
I
have to tell adventures of my own children here. And I think one of their favorite memories was all the kids sliding down the hills here, starting up on the top of 3rd Street and going down 3rd Street about 100 miles an hour on their sleds, and and their ability to run free in the hills was priceless.
Anna, Ed has something he wants to say.
Yeah, Albert Polkenhorn, who was a family friend, he bought every Christmas and my birthday and stuff, bought toy trucks for me. The bigger ones, not the little small ones. Right now I have got those toy trucks above my cupboards in the kitchen. And there were a couple of kind of filling stations too, toy filling stations. So anybody wants to come and look at some strange things like that, well, I got them up there.
Travis?
Oh, we had a lot of fun. Ice skate rink. It just go down there and grade it out. Fill it with water from the top. Run the hose over out of the hydrant and fill it up with water and rocks. And we had to miss the rocks when we were skating.
Well, I remember your grandfather being the butcher over here, and he must have had arthritis. He had heavy leather wrist carriers, and he used to take the little kids, I was one of them, and throw them up in the air. I mean, Cora Hatcher had that. I remember when Ken Geddes married Cora Hatcher's daughter and moved across the street from where I live now. There's just so many memories, so many good people.
Well, I have many. I'll tell you what, I can go up and down the streets and tell you, start with Corbin's drugstore over here, and we come down Victor Avenue. We went to Dixmoor's Cleaner. Then there was a liquor store there owned by Boo Boo Roberts. Come on down the street there, and there was the Antlers Hotel on across the alley. And there was a pool hall in there. I can remember the pool tables and that, but I don't remember nobody running it. Then on down the street was Kopelke's jewelry store. And then on below that, and a lot of people forgot this, there was a restaurant called the Hungry Junction, and the Japanese woman run it. And she had 2 kids, Freddie Harris and Judy Harris. And we went in there and ate a time or two. She wasn't in business very long. But then on down the street there, naturally, Kopelke had the jewelry store, and Phil Sashton worked in there. Beautiful diamond rings. You go by and it was lit up. Harshberger's. Across the street was Eddie Seal's drugstore, Bodecker's barbershop, Zeke's place, Charlie Clark's grocery store, Silver Dollar Cafe, and on up the street from there was Ma Butler she had a little pie shop in there.
Amber Inn.
Yeah, I forgot about the Amber Inn. Yeah, Rex Johnson. And then Silver Dollar, Ma Johnson runs across the street.
Remember that storefront that had the big fish aquarium in the side, and the water was so mucky that you'd have to get up to the window to look, and all of a sudden this big fish would come up right up at you. As a kid, it was scary.
And then I can remember there were 2 car dealerships. There was Bub Steiner first. That's where Travis is now. And then there was Ormont Pontiac was there. And then down the street was the Ford garage building. Philibom sold brand new Ford cars. Come back up the street a little bit, the Hackley Hotel there. Mrs. Hanson had no place. And then Walt Rounds had Arapahoe Market. Down the street there was Barnett's Furniture. She had one of the first TVs in the camp. We'd come up, sit on the sidewalk and watch it. And come across the street, of course, Lil Clark run the Gold Coin Cafe. And then the stove, yeah, that was on down the street, Lida, that's correct, Dish. And then, of course, Matson's had the shoe shop on down below there, and Marie Dustin lived across the street in the White House. And Tish's little dog by the name was Porky. I've never forgot it. Little black and white dog. And yeah, I remember most of the dogs. But anyway, we had a lot of fun. And we come across the street here. We had, like she said, J.C. Penney's, a post office. J.C. Penney's, and then we had yeah, in the KC Market, and then the mortuary. That was a terrible fire. We fought it, and then of course the Elks Club. And I was born and raised here, but by the way, I've been a member of the Victor Elks 63 years, Fascia Club I think 64 years, and just different things. Served city council, fire department, but I'll tell you, we had the best fire department in the world. We had volunteers. And Dewey Allen, he's not here now, but Dewey was one of the top ones, and Travie always there. And of course, a lot of others, and a lot of them passed and gone on. But anyway, I'll shut up here in a little bit. Go ahead.
That's really good.
Okay. Yeah, so the best 3 years of my life were the third grade over here at the Victor Elementary. So that, no, anyway, well, one memory for sure was the Victor Bowling Alley. One of our first jobs here, Matt and I, we set pins there at the Victor Bowling Alley, and kind of a dangerous job because some people really knew how to throw that ball down the alley. But and one of my favorite people there was Benny Nothouse, because he would lay on the floor and guide that ball down the alley, you know, and all. And sometimes he'd get a strike and all. His ball rolled pretty slow, but boy, like I said, setting pins down there, we that was good money back in the 60s. Yeah, the Victor Bowling Alley, a lot of good memories at the bowling alley.
10 cents a line.
Okay, I noticed everyone mentioned a lot of businesses. Did anyone want to mention another business that they thought of fondly growing up? Or do we have, oh, okay.
Right here where we're sitting. There used to be a kind of a motel, had a gas station, and then they had right around here were all little apartments, and then up above they had apartments in it.
I remember that too. Ran along that gas station.
Okay, the next question we have is, prior to Victor Schools being relocated over in Cripple Creek, there was a rivalry between Victor and Cripple Creek. Does anyone want to explain their version of that rivalry?
Yes, Tish,
Oh,
go for it.
gosh. My mother's brother was the class, Reuben Musser, was the class that built the V on the hill. And then the class under him added the HS on the hill. And Cripple Creek had a C on theirs. And it was easy to get to Cripple Creek. You didn't have to climb up the hill. You could almost walk the railroad bed and get up there. So it was easy for our guys. It was easy for our guys to go over and burn their land. Of all things. I don't know why, but, and then it was hard for them to come up and burn RV. So it didn't happen to the Victor guys so much because it was too hard to climb up there. Have you ever climbed up to that V?
Yes.
We used to have to carry buckets or bags of lime up there and water to wash that V, and it was hard. And when we were freshmen, we had to do that, but the rivalry was terrible. And for a Victor girl to date a Cripple Creek boy, even when I was in school, it was bad. Kathy went through the same thing. There's so many memories of Georgiana and some of them that would marry a Cripple Creek boy. Oh, brother. Scandalous. Terrible. For years. For the old timers wouldn't forget that.
Those Victor girls were pretty, though, you know.
Yeah.
Not saying anything bad about Cripple Creek, right?
Well, that was Georgiana Piper just mentioned her name, and she's passed away, but she told Rosemary and I that rivalry came because the girls were prettier in Victor.
Well, Victor had all the gold and Cripple Creek got the glory, and that's always rubbed a sore spot in our side.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my dad, he played on the Victor basketball team, and he said they had a big rivalry, you know, playing basketball against Cripple Creek, and sometimes the mothers would get out there and they would start beating on each other with their purses and all if they disagreed with a call or whatever during the basketball game. So that was quite a scene to see those mothers out there wailing away on each other with their handbags.
Anyone else? Okay, let me come on down.
visual, actually.
Okay, Ed wants to answer this question.
He should have been up here.
Talking about the rivalry between the two towns, they split up the schools when I was in the 5th grade. So when I was in the junior high, went to Cripple Creek. There was 3 Cripple Creek kids decided they was going to beat the crap out of me. One grabbed a hold of one arm and one grabbed a hold of the other arm. They didn't realize that I'd been working with my dad. We was carrying 90-pound rolls of roofing up and down the ladders and doing that kind of stuff. And I just kind of moved them back and forth and whammed them together. They left me alone after that for a while.
Thank you. Anyone else want to answer?
I would. No. Okay. Well, growing up, and I don't remember too much of the rivalry between Cripple Creek and Victor because we'd always, in the summertime, take a bus over to the swimming pool in Cripple Creek. And I guess I got to know most of the people over there and the kids and things long before they combined the schools. But there was one time, and they were talking about this, tearing up the Victor VHS up there. Well, we went over to Cripple Creek, and when we had to go to school over there, we tore up the Cripple Creek. And I mean, we just rolled every rock and everything ever which way over there. And they got pretty upset over that, but they put it back together, and when they put it back together, they put a B in between. There was also a stoplight in Cripple Creek. They used to say it was the only graveyard in the world that had a stoplight in it.
It was always caution.
It's a little changed now, but anyway, at that time, it was on a Halloween. And all of us got together and we cleaned up everything we could get. We put on that stoplight around it. And cop by the name of Nick Bandetti, he says, I don't care how much stuff you put on that stoplight, but just leave a fire lane so we can get somebody through. So the next day, a guy by the name of Jim White was the mayor of Cripple Creek. And they said the kids was going to have to clean that up. And he says, no way in the world. He says, the city will clean that up. He says, that's the only time Cripple Creek ever gets cleaned up.
Anyone else want to answer the question?
Well, we delivered an outhouse to Cripple Creek, city of Cripple Creek. We delivered an outhouse, and we pulled in there, and Benny Nothouse was driving a Ford truck, Mickey. And we laid down in the truck with the outhouse, and we stole it up here on 7th Street, up by Sanifers. And we drove in there, and we dropped the tailgate down, and we stood it up, and we left it. We never did like him anyway. We left a sign that says to the City Council of Cripple Creek, compliments of the City of Victor. And oh yeah. But we never cleaned nothing up, but we delivered the outhouse.
Thank you. So Doc Denman's service to the Gold Camp expanded several generations. What's your favorite Doc Denman story?
Bub, you need a shot? Drop your drawers and bend over. Penicillin, you'll be all right. He'll give you a sucker, and you go home.
Yeah, Carl, that was my favorite story too, was that shot of penicillin, because it was $6 and you were out the door in about 6, or actually less than 6 minutes, and it always cured whatever I had, whatever ailment I had with that.
Same needle.
That same needle, that's shot of penicillin. And actually, Doc Dim saved my life when I was a baby. Of course, I don't have any memory of that, but my mother said that he actually, I was kind of choking when I was born, and he pulled something out of my throat, and I did have a little brain damage from that, but other than that, he did save my life.
Very wonderful doctor.
Yeah, good doctor.
Right?
In 1973, I had to visit Doc Denman to get a physical to run a hoist. It was a requirement by the Bureau of Mines. And I'm waiting in his office, and Nurse Titmus said, well, he's just about done with the patient, and then you can go in. He finished with the patient. The patient came out. I started to get up to go, and a woman came charging in ahead of me, ran into his office and said, I just got your letter. What do you mean I've got syphilis? And Doc Denman said, well, I'm sorry, ma'am. That's what the tests show. So she starts bawling her eyes out. And she said, I must have got it off a toilet seat. Doc Denman had a very dry sense of humor. He said, Madame, I would pay very good money to watch you have intercourse with a toilet seat.
Yeah, I don't think Doc Denman could really diagnose anything, but he could put miners that got hurt back together and save their lives. There was one time on the Ajax, and I was running the trams, and this guy was pulling chutes, and the chutes got stuck, and he took a bar and he was jamming up into this chute to get it loose, and a big rock come down and hit the end of that bar, right through his jugular vein, and it wasn't a very pleasant sight. But old Denman come down there, and he couldn't do anything till after, they got him off of that. They had to take a cutting torch and cut the bar off before they could get him out of there. That was one of my worst memories, working in the mines.
Billy Sherrill was a miner that Mickey's talking about.
Anyone else? Tish, you got any stories about dog?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of stories about dog, but my Georgiana's mother, Mrs. McCleary, was my grandmother's best friend. And Georgiana's older sister, Jean Van Landingham, was my mother's best friend. So I was always taken along with Georgiana or Mrs. McCleary. And we called her Mac. And she cleaned houses, and she cleaned for Mrs. Denman, Willie Denman, upstairs in the Gold Coin Club there. And I was always up there, and this was my first experience with Siamese cats. She had these, I think, 4 huge Siamese cats, not just a Siamese cat, but they were big. And they were always sneaking up and licking over the couch, and I swear their eyes were this big. And as a kid, it just used to scare me to death. And I used to think, how do people come up here and see Dr. Denman with these cats staring at you?
He was a local dentist too. He was the local dentist too, because I remember getting a few teeth pulled out at his office. Well, they'd have to hold you down.
And what Matt didn't say was Doc Denman delivered him and his brothers.
Yeah, we were all born over there at the Hotel St. Nicholas is now.
For those of you who, did you have something else?
No. Well, I was going to say, I was, like I say, Doc Denman, he brought me into this world at Hilltop Hospital, which is now the St. Nicholas, and then my brother Jim was actually born up here at the Gold Coin Club, and when Doc Denman had an office in the Gold Coin Club, so.
For those of you who grew up in the Cripple Creek Mining District, does anyone want to speak to what their first job was and how much did you get paid?
Yeah, my first job was a dishwasher at the cottage. Well, my first job was probably delivering newspapers, but anyway, first job was at the Cottage Inn, and I was a dishwasher there for actually starting at 14 years old, and I washed dishes for 4 years there in the summertime when school was out. But I made $1 an hour, $40 a week.
Well, I had so many jobs, it'd take all day to tell you where I've been, but I've had plenty. Actually, we started working when I was about 6 years old. People won't believe this, but family of 14, we had to get out and hustle. And I'd carry wood and coal in for Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Sandifer up on the hill, and just different people around town here. Mrs. Sweet, and you know, we all had different things to do, but I would make anywhere from, I don't know, my dad, we used to peddle gold ore rocks, still peddling them. I brought some today, by the way, it's a little high grade. And we would just do about everything there was. But I did leave here one time in 1958 and went to Breckenridge, Colorado, and I worked on the Roberts Tunnel. It's 22.5 miles long, and it was we was down 150 feet deep, and we was back 6 miles underground. But I only lasted a week, and I couldn't miss my wife Carolyn. I had to come back home. So, but anyway, it was a good paying job. And then we went on. We worked in several mines, and then NORAD. When the mines closed at 60 here, most of the miners went to work at NORAD. And then after NORAD, I come back, and I worked with this gal right here 50-some years ago. She was a good secretary and treasurer, and I just looked the other day. She wrote my paychecks out. I made $240 a month. I had a lot of money. Thank you.
Wait, Dad, can you tell a story about your big shoe when you were selling rocks? And the tourists No, tell that, please.
Oh, my daughter. Well, anyway, we selling gold ore rocks out here and everything, and we had hand-me-down shoes a lot of times if we could get a pair. J.C. Penney had brand new ones, but only got 1 or 2 pair a year. Anyway, the tourists, we'd sell rocks to the tourists. So I had a pair of engineer boots on, and they was a lot bigger than I should have had, but they was hand-me-downs. And this car come by from Texas, and they said, oh yeah, we got oil wells pumping this and that. They wouldn't buy nothing. So when he pulled away, I pulled my foot underneath his car, the tire, but my toes was back in my shoe, and he actually wrote, and he could feel the thump when he went over, and I fell down. And he backed up and he threw a $10 bill on the ground. He says, tell your dad, your mom, you fell off that mountain over there.
That's a true story. I was there when that happened. There you go.
They used to have a visitor center out there. I think it was a Chamber of Commerce or somebody had, and they paid kids to go out there and be at the visitor center and direct traffic and sell things from the city, rocks and everything. I could never go out there. My folks wouldn't let me go out there and be that. But the first job, real job that I had, I worked with Willie Denman, started the Cripple Creek Museum, and can't think of her name. Aiken. What was her name? Aiken's name.
Alice or?
No, Penny's name.
Oh, Margie.
I worked for Margie Aiken and Mrs. Denman at the museum in Cripple Creek with Avery Kaner. Do you remember the Kaners? We were the first kids that got to stay there, and this was in the summers when she first opened that. And it was a nice experience. I have no idea what I was paid. It was just fun.
What was your first job?
I think mine was a paper boy,
Yeah.
but I don't know that it was just my job. Because I'd get out of school and go up to the garage, and the papers would come in, and there'd be 2 or 3 guys that were there visiting Grandpa, and everybody'd fold the newspapers for me. They'd throw them in the back of a pickup, an old 56 Ford we had, and I'd hop on the tailgate, and Grandma would drive me around every spot around town, so I don't know if it was really my job.
He did it a few times on his pony.
Right? What did you do?
When I was a kid, I was living in Minnesota, and I set pins in the bowling alley and caddied at the golf course, but I was not a kid here. But my daughter cleaned what was at the time a laundromat in this building right over here. And once a week she'd go in there and clean that laundromat. Then she'd go over to Mac McCormick and he'd give her a $5 bill for her payment.
When I first came here, everybody burned wood and coal. So every morning about 6 a.m., I would take a dump truck down to Florence and get 20 ton of coal on that dump truck. I would bring it up here and I would spend the afternoon delivering it to the schools, the courthouse, the Elks Club, private homes, and so forth. But there's a little side story. I would come up the Phantom Canyon, and coming out of Florence and also in the Phantom Canyon, there was a 10-ton limit for trucks crossing the bridges. My truck, fully loaded, weighed about 30 ton. And I remember a couple of those bridges, particularly the one down in Florence, used to really talk to me when I drove over it.
Yeah.
First job I can remember was getting in coal and wood for Mrs. Wire. Lived down here on Spicer Street, I believe, and setting pins at the bowling alley. We made whole 10 cents a line, so we were in the big bucks.
Well, my first job was working on the Vindicator when I was 6 years old. I didn't work for the mine. I just worked for my dad. He was a leaser. And he'd bring the ore up and then we'd have to sort it. Well, I went up to see my dad one day and he said, "You want to learn how to sort ore?" And I said, "Yeah." So he got one of these old wire milk cartons and set it there so I could be high enough to reach the sorting table. And he showed me how to sort the ore. Next thing I knew, he had disappeared and I was sitting there sorting ore by myself. And every time they got a shipment, I was up there sorting ore for nothing.
Ed, can you tell us what your first job at the Elks was?
First job at the Elks,
Yes.
cleaning the spittoons. I was working for Huber, Matt's grandmother, our grandfather, and I was cleaning the spittoons and I used the sink as you're going down the stairs. And yeah, that's first job at the Elks Club.
Filling that hopper for my Huber.
Yeah.
I've done two of those spittoons.
Yeah, and then Ed, one of his first jobs was delivering groceries for my mom and dad. They owned the KC Market right across the street here, and he delivered groceries all, Independence, what are now all ghost towns, but there were people.
I did too.
Yeah, so yeah, that's right. Carl did too. So with delivering groceries, so that was they're talking about that now, where they get they deliver groceries for folks, but that dates way back to the 1950s and all.
We would pick up the Ford truck and Ronnie Robb, well, he's passed away now, but Steve's brother, and I would deliver groceries to up here, called Strong's Camp, by the way. It's the little yellow house is still standing, and the family lived there at the time was Pitz's, I think. And then we would go to Goldfield, and we'd go to Independence, and we delivered to Frank B. Moore. We delivered to the woman at the post office, Jinx was her name, Leila, I believe, and we delivered to her, and then we'd make the rounds and come back, and Francis Robb, and I went in there, so I said to Francis, I said, well, and he was quite a Christian man, he really was, he was sold cigarettes, and I said, he went to pay me, and I said, I'd like to have a pack of them cigarettes, Lucky's. Then he spent 20 minutes telling me how bad it was for me and that. We got through and I said, well, Francis, if they're so bad, why do you sell them? He said, you got a good point there.
Okay, does anyone have a mining story that they would like to share?
Hundreds of them. I guess. No, well,
I don't know why I get to do all the yakking, but anyway, there's quite a few stories. We took several dead men out of mine shafts. They climbed down to get gassed. But I want to talk about Tish's dad, Jake Baker. This guy got down in the mine up here on top of the hill called the Joe Dandy on the 12th level, and he got gassed. And so we had to go down in there and get him. Well, first of all, we got a hold of Jake Baker. And Travis has still got the wrecker up there, the little Chevy. And they took all the cable off and they put this airplane cable on there. I think there was 1,500 feet we put on there. It was not very big, but it was strong. And we went down the shaft, and there was Jack Lorenz and Earl Beals and myself, and I don't know just who the other one was, but Jake was on top. And we got down there, and the gas was bad, but we had safety lamps and everything. Earl Beals was also with us. We got down there, and they lowered that cable down. They used a ship wheel and lowered that cable down. There was no skip or nothing there. Clear to the bottom. And Earl Beals and Jack tied this guy up with a rope deal like, and we hooked Jake's hook on there, and we had to climb the manway all the way. It was 1,200 feet. I'll never forget it as long as I live. And we had several others we took out later that died in mines. But anyway, we hoisted that clear to the top, and after we come up out of there, then Jake started it up, and it was real slow, and we had to help guide that cable back and forth like on a fishing reel on Jake's deal because he was running the controls on the back of the truck, and we hoisted that guy out of there. But there were several guys. We was headed to the Gold Camp Search and Rescue then. There were several guys that died in mines. We had to go get the Dolly Varden. And I'll tell you a sad story about that over there. There was another guy too that died in the Mary McKinney. But on the Dolly Varden one, and this is cruel, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. Joe Keating was a mine inspector, and he came up, and it was kind of cloudy, and it wasn't. Because when the gas comes into the mines up here, the barometric pressure is low. And Wilbur Warsaw, if there's clouds on that range over there on the sandy crystals, you're not going to work. So anyway, this guy, we was sitting there, and I'm always thinking about something. And there's a square mirror on the side of that truck. And I went over there and took a crescent wrench, and I took it off. And the sun would come out a little bit. And I shined it down that shaft, and we could see the guy's head sticking out in the shaft. Well, the gas was bad. We couldn't, and he was only down there about 80 feet. So anyway, we waited and waited and waited, and it wouldn't let up. And I told Joe Keating, the mine inspector, I said, if you'll get rid of these news media here, we'll get that guy out of the hole. We don't even have to go down there. And he said, well, how are you going to do that? We used a lariat rope. We lowered it down there with that mirror reflecting off the sun and the shaft, and his head was sticking out, and we hooked him. And we pulled him up out of that shaft with it around his neck. But anyway, that was one of the gruesome stories. I'll shut up.
So, yeah, that was rough. But anyway, the miners used to like to pull a lot of pranks on each other, working together in the mines. But my dad was telling me one of the favorite things to do when you go to work up there, you're in your street clothes, and then you change into what we call diggers, your work clothes, to get out on the mine and go to work. And so you come up out of the mine at the end of the day, and you would hop in the shower to take your shower before going home, and the miners would grab your street clothes, and they would, out of your basket up there at the what we call the dry, which is actually the shower room. But anyway, they would grab your street clothes out of the basket, and they would soak them in the water. And this is in the wintertime when it was 40 below zero, and they would throw those clothes out into that 40 below zero. So when you got out of the shower, your street clothes are all frozen solid, and then you had to try to wait for them to thaw out before you could put your clothes back on and go home.
Anna, I'm gonna go here.
I was about 12 years old, and around that age, maybe 14, I don't recall exactly, but the location was just down below from the Baptist church, and maybe a little bit more that direction. I guess that. Anyway, I get up here, the direction's a little different. But anyway, the Little Rascals, all of my buddies and friends, Henry Chapman and Anna, and maybe some of the Roy boys or Wilsons. But anyway, we were playing some baseball. And I was Carol Holquist, Francis, my nieces, Snyder, Pat, and Mary Sue, and so we were playing baseball actually in the street, you know, and a little bit of a rise, the hill going up, but whatever. But we were playing ball, and all of a sudden I heard this wailing sirens going off, whistle, and it was just moving, and we just had a kind of a rain, and it was all moist and some of that, but it became a very sad moment. And then just a little later we found out that Carol Holquist's father had died in a mining accident, and that was so hard on us little tykes. I don't know if we were such little tykes, but for having always fun, whether we were, just touch on this, we were selling pop bottles for 2 cents, and actually, Victor, they give you a penny for a beer bottle. So I take it into the bar over here where the gold coin was, and my brother-in-law is a World War II vet, Marion Snyder. He says, what are you kids doing in here? Oh, we're selling our bottles. Oh, no. Well, we turned them in, and the beer bottles and gunny sack, maybe 5 cents, something like that. But it was mainly the bottles is what we sold there for our show tickets and all of our good times. We were entrepreneurs. We made money. But he reached in, pulled out a silver dollar, and it was not uncommon, and said, "Here, get out of here. Don't be coming back in here again." But so that was a little bit more cheerful. I just briefly, because it's a long story, I'd like to share something about one of my relatives, and I know Ed knows Epperson's, and I'm sure some of you do too. My uncle Harold Epperson, during the Depression, and my dad was also working the mines. He worked the Independence, several of them, and the Portland and the Ajax. A lot of family worked the Ajax, and but anyway, my uncle, he come up, and during the Depression, and the way my mom says it, and I knew my Uncle Harold pretty good. He's a pretty smart guy, and kind of an inventor as well. But I'm not going to go in those stories. But anyway, he hired 10 miners, and one of them was a preacher. So the Elks Lodge is where this was taking place, and they started kidding him about why'd you hire that preacher? He said, I don't give. He can sit on a rock pile, but as long as he's praying hard. Well, apparently the preacher prayed hard, and so at the end of the month or whatever, that ore was very rich. And I heard that from the owner and his son of the strong mine. But that vein is still down in there. It's called the Epperson vein or whatever. And I said it was a rich ore. He said, no, it was very, very rich ore, and high grade. And so my uncle would ride the railroad cars into old Colorado City to make sure the miners didn't switch up his cars. But he made several $100,000 or so. And wow, what that money would be today in the millions. That was during the Depression, and he did help out people. Someone said at the Oaks, I guess, Shorty, we're going to get a coal in our sockets around Christmas. He said, you guys haven't even been home to change your clothes from the mine he's talking about. If you'd been home, you'd seen you got a load of coal. You got a ton of coal. So what a blessing they got.
Any stories about mining?
Yeah. Several times I got hurt in the mines. But the one that ended my mining career. I was working out on a shelf road about 2 miles down, and we were running an incline shaft going in, and we had shot around the night before, and the top holes of that round didn't go. And I was standing there trying to figure out how these, to shoot those top holes, because it was still full of dynamite and everything, and how to shoot those holes. And I felt this dirt hit me on the back. My hard hat, running down my back. And I thought, oh, I got to get out of here. It looked like more coming down. About that time, a great big slab of rock come down and took out the timbers and everything else. And I was buried under 5 tons of rock and timber. And that kind of ended my mining career. But I'm still up and running today.
Mick, tell them about when you got gassed up in the Ajax and my brother, Poncho.
Well, we were working on between the 27th and 28th level of the Ajax, and we were up in there about 75 foot high in this raise. And Al Delaney was trying to break through to the next level. And I was running a slusher drift off the other direction. And I got back there and I was ready to put a slusher pin in. And I felt real dizzy and I thought, oh, I got to get out of here. I'm getting, in gas. I turned around and I don't remember anything else. Well, Al had gone up and he had tried to light another cigarette. Well, it wouldn't light, so he came down and he seen I was laying on the muck pile back there. And he went and grabbed me and pulled me over to the manway where there's fresh air coming up. And then he went out and got help. Well, Carl Roy's brother, Poncho, was about the only guy big enough to carry me out of that 4x4 manway. And to this day, I still don't know how he got me out of there. But I woke up in the hospital 3 days later with that. But
we hear about people that were injured or killed in the mines. Let me tell you about a couple of young women that were very lucky. About 50 years ago, when I was working at the El Paso mine, we were loading timber on the cage. We were doing repair work on the shaft, and one of the guys I worked with looked up the hill. This was near Anaconda, what we called Carlson's Corner, there on the edge of Raven Hill. And what happened was there was a Ford Bronco that had come around the corner too fast, and it went off the road and it started going down the hill, and then it disappeared. Well, we went up there, and it had gone down a shaft. And we looked down there, and it was about 50 feet down, and there were these 2 young girls that worked for the Forest Service who were panicked. But anyway, we got some rope and lowered the rope down there to where we could get them out. But before we got the second girl out, Dale Weaver, who ran the El Paso, came up there with a boom truck, and he asked them to hook his cable onto the hitch on the back of the Bronco so he could pull the Bronco up out of there. We got the girl out. He started the winch on the boom truck, and the connector between the power takeoff and the winch snapped, and that Jeep went down about 300 feet. As it was just barely hanging there. So those young ladies were very, very lucky.
I didn't work underground. I worked on surfaces. I ran mine hoist there at the Ajax for 3 years, and I decided that wasn't my calling in life. It was a pretty good experience.
My dad was born in Texas, and he had asthma so bad he had to sit, and they treated it different then, but he had asthma so bad that he had to sit in a rocking chair. Well, his dad, Rufus Baker, he knew working in the hayfields and everything in Texas wasn't going to help my dad any, so he loaded my dad up, and they went up to Craig. There wasn't anything to do at Craig, so he ended up coming down to the district here. And he was a blacksmith at the Crescent for years and years. And at that time, everybody did everything they could, and my dad ended up firing the furnace. Well, they didn't have any safeguards up there, so firing a furnace and that smoke coming out didn't help my dad's lungs anyway. But and Daddy stayed in the mines for a while, and I used to go with my mother's brother, Uncle Carl. He hauled ore for the trading and transfer, and he also had a lease, and we'd learn how to pick out the good ore and throw it in. I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I was doing, but I was up there helping and thought I was doing something. My husband worked. It was the last diamond driller in the Ajax when the Golden Cycle closed it up, and he drilled 3,100 feet underground. He'd go underground, never see the sun all day long. And a lot of these friends that they're talking about that were hurt or injured, killed, it was hard. It was hard for miners. But I always figured that my grandmother always told me that every stumbling block is a stepping stone. And closing the Ajax was hard for the people up here. It was really hard. But my husband ended up driving for 35 years to the Air Force Academy, working with the Cadet Athletic Association. And I'm not sure that he would have lived had he stayed in the Ajax. It was hard.
A mining story? Oh, wow.
I'll get back to you. You got one?
Well, just should maybe talk about leasing. You know, we talked about people working in the mines and all of that, and what they call split check leasing. And you lease out a block of ground between two levels on a vein, and then you would mine that out. And the company, they would get half of the profit out of the gold ore that was produced, and then you'd get half of the profit. Like I said, they call it split check leasing. So my dad and a guy by the name of Nick Cox, they worked as leasers over on the Crescent, and they did get into some bad air there one time, and the only thing that kept them alive was laying down by the airline, the compressed air that ran the drilling machines, and they laid down by the airline, and that air coming out of that airline kept them alive, or they would not have survived that bad air. It was called the Moose Country over there on the Crescent, and it was really what we call gassy. And when we talk about gas, it's actually carbon dioxide. It's just air void of oxygen, so it's really not a gas, but it's just that it's very lethal. There is no oxygen in it. It comes into the mine, like Carl was saying, when the barometer is really low, and it fills up the mine just like filling with water. And my dad told me a story about one guy that like I said, the gas is coming in low, and so you can be standing up in a tunnel underground, and you'll be fine when you're standing up. But if you sit down, well, you sit right down into that gas. And my dad said there was one guy that sat down there to eat his lunch, and when they found that guy, the sandwich that he was eating was halfway to his mouth, and he was just like a rigor mortis had set in, and the sandwich never made it to his mouth. So the gas killed him that quickly. It just one breath, and he was gone.
Well, the Carlton Mill over there in 1960, and I think there's only 2 or 3 of people left that worked there when I did. But my brother Dan Roy's here today, and he worked there also. But Charlotte Greenlee worked there as a secretary, and also Ruth Knob, she's gone now. But anyway, we was building that dam below the mill by hand, and side of my shoe was wore out. And Charlie Carlton says, anybody want to work a Saturday? Well, Golden Cycle was never very well liked in the camp here at all. They was very tight, and they run the grocery store at the Crescent, and the old soul, Tennessee Ernie Ford said, "Oh, my soul to the company store." Well, Dad sometimes would get his check and it'd say minus $8, no check at all, because my mother got all the groceries at the commissary. But anyway, I come up out there one time, and Charlie Carlton says, "Kid, meet me up at the office at noon." I said, "Okay." So I went up there at noon, and they sold shoes in big yellow boxes. There's $5 for a pair of engineer boots. And he said, "Kid, would you like that pair of boots?" And my side of my shoe was out. I said, "Charlie, I can't afford it." "Well," he said, "we'll take it out of your check." I said, "I still can't." He says, "Wait a minute. How about $2.50 on that?" He said, "Try them boots on." So I tried the boots on. He said, "How they fit?" I said, "Fit good." And he said, $2.50. I said, "Okay." So about a month went on, and Charlie called me in the office, and he said, "Well, how's them new boots?" I said, "Charlie, they're fine." But I said, "I want to ask you one question. Why did you let me have them for $2.50? They're $5. Well, he said, "Kid, they was mixed match. One was a 9, one was an 8.5. And he says, and so then I had to wear 2 socks in that boot after that.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Talking about Charlie Carl, I was probably 12, maybe 13, running a top car on the Vindicator, and this was on a Saturday, and they weren't doing any hoisting at the time, and Charlie wanted to go underground. So, but he wanted to have some partner to go with him. So they fixed me up with a hard hat and a belt, light, and we managed to get on a skip, go down, and got down there. I don't even know what level it was, to tell you the truth, because I was so excited to get to go down with the superintendent to the underground. And we got down there, and he had to lift me out of the bucket, roll me out onto the station in order to get out of there. But anyway, we walked down, and Charlie Carl could walk so fast. And I was running, trying to keep up with him, and my hard hat bouncing around, and my belt was too big, and it was falling down. And anyway, we're going down through this drift, and he stopped, and there was another drift going off the other direction. He says, "You go out that way." He says, "There's the old cycle shaft." And then we kept right on going and got over to the Teresa. And he said, "This is a Teresa shaft." And we kind of went back kind of north. Anyway, I think it was north. From that, we went back in there and came to this chute. Well, Charlie says, "Let me use your glove." And I wonder what he meant. Well, I let him have my glove. He says, "You see that kind of can underneath that tin can underneath that chute?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Go fill that up with water." So I filled it up with water. There was some water under that chute. And he threw it on the wall of the drift. And all the mud washed off of it. And there was a vein of ore, I would say about 3 inches wide, just running out of that drift. And he said, "See that?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Charlie, give me a lease on that." He says, "You're too young to mind." I said, "Okay." And anyway, we mudded it back up again. And we left. And I told my dad about it, and my dad went and talked to Charlie to see if he couldn't get a lease on it. And Charlie says, "I don't know what he's talking about." So that vein is still there. And I don't know whether I could find it if I went right back down there again or not, but I'd sure like to try.
I have one more thing and then I'll shut up. I've talked so much.
sometime when we get a round table up here, there's a lot of places that's away from here that's history and it's lost. Like Rainbow Falls, the Rainbow House. Now, Tish, Travi, and maybe a few others knows where it's at, but going down through there, a lot of this information that I have in my head, Butch Granger and Jim Cameron told me because I helped them a lot and feed their cows when I was pretty young. But this is lost history and going out, there's a place called Hollywood over here. A few of you know where it's at. Dutchtown, Pickles Hill, Strong's Camp, going up towards Goldfield. Tamale Flats, Mickey Nothouse ought to know where that's at. Tommy Chapman named it up there behind Hank Adams, and they call it Tamale Flats, and this woman cooked tamales and sold them there when they was kids. And just several places. The Goldfield Dump, you don't ever hear nothing mentioned. And down south, Pot Gulch Country, Carlin Gulch, and Iron Gulch, and to Trenchard Flats, and the Iowa Mine, and these are all hunting places. The Dutch Henry by Nipple Mountain, and Vance Gulch, and Waters Peak down by Bob Shoemaker's ranch towards Garden Park.
How many mines are gone?
Huh?
How many mines are gone? The Bluebird?
Oh, up on the hill here, well, all our mines, we've lost. And let me tell you something. I don't know who in the world, and I got some Indian in me, and I am this group. Whoever took Squaw Mountain and named Porcupine something, whatever, that's not right. Because if you're going to get away with that Indian name, there's Buck Gulch, there's Buck Mountain, there's Navajo Mesa out here by 4 Mile. You want to do away with all Indian names. I'm very upset, but it'll always be Squaw Mountain to me. And that's right here where we was born. Thank you.
I'll just add that everybody here should realize that we're sitting on a bunch of, underneath Victor. I mean, Victor's called the City of Mines, and so there's a bunch of open stopes underneath us, and a stope is an excavation underground where they took the gold out, and there's some gigantic stopes, and once in a while those stopes cave in, and we end up calling that a glory hole. Now, some people call the little holes all over the hillsides out here glory holes, but they're actually what they call prospect holes, where the old-timers were prospecting for gold, and there's thousands of those around. But Matt and I were talking this morning about how many actual mines were right here in Victor. I mean, head frames, it used to be a head frame right here, and what was the name of that one, Matt?
Can't remember what the name was, but there was a mine right in this area right here.
Yeah, so the whole city of Victor, but Victor, like Carl was saying, Victor had the gold, and Cripple Creek had the name Victor had the gold. This was the richest gold mining area in, actually in the entire world, one of the richest, and so anyway, but Victor is called the City of Mines, and there's a lot of mines, like I said, a lot of open holes right underneath where you're sitting.
That's true.
All righty. Well, on behalf of Victor Heritage Society, we want to thank all of you for joining in and being a part of this, because this is how we're trying to preserve our history and get things recorded so that we have these memories, because they're very important to all of us. So thank you very much. We
Hey.